I started my career about 40 years ago as a classroom teacher in a school called Matadi in Delhi as a head of department for about 18 years. Why aren't teachers like any other professional? What's wrong with that? Children have a certain aptitude and we must take into account the aptitude of the students before we recommend a career to them, because they may not do very well in a career that doesn't interest them and that definitely doesn't match their aptitude. Parents of such students are always in a denial mode and they don't want to accept the fact that their child may be suffering from learning difficulty. So my suggestion to teachers would be,
To all my dear listeners out there, a very good evening. I'm Anne Gracious, your host for today, representing ICAE. Welcome to the fourth episode of our podcast Friday series called as Beyond Borders Higher Ed Edition. Today, we are thrilled to discuss the future of schools in India. Our topic today is leadership in education, shaping the future of schools. We have a very special guest with us, that is Dr. Neeta Bali. Thank you, ma'am, for coming in today. And she's a very well-known and highly respected educator in the education industry and has played excellent role in setting up GD Goenka School, Kasiga School, which is now known as the number one school in Dehradun, Uttarakhand, and has been the former director for St. Anandram Jaipuria Schools. Well, let's deep dive into more about the topic today on how she has played a crucial role in setting up schools. So, ma'am, thank you once again. And can you share a bit about your background and how you chose to enter into the education industry?
thank you, Anne, for having me on the show to begin with. Let me tell you that I started my career about 40 years ago, and it's a long career trajectory starting with as a classroom teacher in a school called Matadi in Delhi as a head of department for about 18 years, followed by a short stint of about 6 years with the APJ as a vice principal. Subsequently, with the GD Goenka group for 12 years as a principal initially, and subsequently as a director, also a short stint with Podar International School, Powai, Mumbai, and St. Anandram Jaipuria School as director schools pan India. So that's been broadly my journey. What really brought me into education? I would say that I came into education and teaching by default. But once I was there to stay. As they say, once you're there and smitten, I would say I was smitten and I was there to stay, because I realized that a teacher can really influence students and the influence of a teacher lasts an eternity. And I think the teachers have so much to contribute. When I look at the teaching profession and the teaching fraternity, I think they deserve huge applause and a lot of respect, because they are the ones who shape the destiny of a nation. They are the ones who craft the careers. They are the ones who determine the destinies of a lot of young people. So they're teachers who have a lot to contribute. So I really feel that as teachers, we must look upon teaching not merely as a profession which you take up simply because you can't get into something else, but as something which is a calling, which becomes your credo, which becomes your calling in life. So let us look upon teaching with huge respect, and I would recommend that a lot of young people who are not inclined to come into teaching should look at teaching as an option. And let me also tell you that teaching has now become fairly lucrative where salaries are concerned. So I think it's time that people look upon teaching and teachers with a lot of respect, and a lot of young people should opt for teaching as a career.
Okay. Ma'am, 40 years is equal like 4 decades, and it's a huge time frame for you to be in the same industry and in fact play a crucial role in bringing it up, growing it, and working with multi-curriculum schools, okay, and setting it up from the scratch to the final stage that it is today. But in the 4 decades, you have always seen educational systems changing, evolving, pandemic being hit in the country, and a lot more. So if you can briefly tell us how the education landscape has changed in the last 4 decades.
I think the landscape of education has changed drastically. In fact, it has undergone a sea change, if I may say so. To begin with, many years ago, when we took to teaching as a career, it was a very teacher-centric environment. Today, I think the environment is very, very student-centric. Not merely is it student-centric, I think people are not hesitant in experimenting with the new curricula. They are happy to take on the international curricula. They're not really satisfied with chalk and talk. We are going much beyond chalk and talk. There's integration of technology in teaching learning. Particularly after the pandemic, I think technology has become so rampant and so indispensable that it's
Yes.
here and here to stay. So there is a lot of integration of technology now with the coming of AI, the use of ChatGPT and other tools in the classrooms is
Yes.
very, very common. And anyone who is not able to incorporate the new methodology, playway methodology, as I said, international curricula with its emphasis on learner profile and also with its emphasis on a certain aspect of risk taking, emphasis on research, ferreting out information rather than giving students information on a platter and asking them to mug up that information and regurgitate in the examination. I think everything has undergone a change. The teaching methodology, the pedagogy, the patterns of assessment. I think everything has undergone a change. The integration of technology and of course teachers capacity building. Teachers are eager to learn and reskill themselves because they also realize that if they don't reskill themselves, they are going to become redundant in today's world. So I think teaching has completely undergone a change. Educational landscape has completely undergone a change. Investors are investing heavily in fabulous infrastructure so that they can provide state of the art infrastructure to the students. So all that, I think the frugality that we talked about some years ago is no longer the norm. Everybody wants to give the best to their children, and those who have the wherewithal to send these children to some state of the art schools are doing so. And I think in doing that, the entire educational landscape seems to have been transformed so beautifully. And I would say we've moved by leaps and bounds. There are international exchanges. There's so many more opportunities for students. There's such greater awareness. And children, I would say, are brighter. Somehow I feel the children are brighter. They are more well informed. They're forward looking. They're ambitious. So everything seems to have changed in teaching, learning, and in the educational landscape.
Yes, ma'am. I completely agree. In fact, I have seen my mother being in a teaching profession, but for the medical students, and now the teachers have evolved. Their teaching patterns have changed. The students' adaptability has changed. In fact, I also feel there's a change in the student-parent community that has come through the years, and parents are now very much involved compared to the previous years. And there's been a lot of changes, and we see that growth. But I also feel, just compared to the corporate culture, also there's talk in the town that teachers are also having a lot of KPIs, a lot of more I would say tasks and duties above, way above teaching and beyond that. So what do you say has changed in the teaching culture? Not just the teaching methods, but because the schools are now investing more into, I would say, infrastructure, into a lot more activities, I feel teacher is not just ending with the job of teaching, but is playing more role beyond that. If you can just put a highlight to it, and how, as leaders of the school, you all ensure that the teachers are motivated to stay long and do that task completely.
Not merely the teachers. In fact, if you look at the principal of a school or a director of a school, they're no longer just a principal or an academic head. In fact, they are a CEO now. They're looking at all kinds of deliverables. They're also looking at financials. They're also looking at return on investment, just about everything. So all leaders are now playing a multi-pronged role. And I think it percolates from the top. Teachers definitely, their main and core function is to ensure that good academic inputs are provided to students in a classroom. Having said that, of course, there are multiple other things they're supposed to do apart from teaching in a classroom. Teaching learning is not just that their focus is only on teaching learning. There are many other things, many other add-ons, if I may say so, many other KRAs, if I may say so, that the teachers are engaged with. But then at the end of the day, do remember that the teacher of today is definitely much better paid than the teacher of yesteryears. All right. So anybody who comes into teaching has to know that today it is no longer to be looked upon as a half day's job. That I am married, therefore I can take to teaching because it only means being at work half the day. In fact, your work spills over beyond 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, it spills over. And let me also tell you, Anne, that in a lot of international schools where international curriculum like the IB or Cambridge, particularly the IB, is being transacted, There are teachers who probably work till wee hours of the morning, particularly
Yes.
during examination and
Yes.
when they're trying to assist students. But then I think you also get paid for those efforts, and you also get a lot of appreciation and satisfaction. So I think teachers, like any other professional, why aren't teachers like any other professional? What's wrong with that? They should be playing a multi-pronged role. But of course, I really believe that retention of teachers is very important. Teacher attrition can very adversely affect the student performance.
True.
So it is the responsibility of every principal, every school administrator to ensure that they reduce. They can't completely cut off or mitigate. They can't completely mitigate teacher attrition, but they must try and reduce it the maximum that they can, because it's important for teachers to serve for sustained periods of time in any organization so that the students can perform well in their exams and their learning outcomes are consistent, because adapting to a new staff, adapting to a new teacher takes a fair amount of time. But at the end of the day, I think teachers are like any other professional and should be prepared to take on multi-pronged roles.
Absolutely. In fact, I appreciate hats off to every teacher out there who is playing a major role for today's students who are going to be upcoming leaders, upcoming businessmen, and a lot more in the future. Ma'am, compared to the vast experience that you have worked with multicurricular schools, right? And you have in and out experience and the depth knowledge about it. There is, I would say, a most common saying in India amongst parent community that international curriculum is much better than national curriculum. What are your thoughts about it? How can they choose it actually?
See, the national and the international curriculum may be essentially different because of a few reasons. One, I think in most of the national curricula, whether it is the CBSE or the CISE curriculum, there may be a little more emphasis on textbooks. But having said that, I would say at the end of the day, the way you transact the curriculum in the classroom, the innovation that you bring into the classroom, whether you teach the national curriculum or you teach the international curriculum, will really determine the learning outcomes. Having said that, the international curriculum definitely puts a greater emphasis on researching for information. They teach you the skills of referencing, researching, ferreting out information. They teach you about plagiarism and so on, and originality of ideas. For example, in the IB, you have the extended essay or the theory of knowledge essay. Now, probably if we were to integrate something similar into the national curriculum, I think that would be a huge value addition. But then, finally, it really depends pretty much on the teacher, the attitude, the aptitude of the teacher, the passion that the teacher brings to the subject and to the classroom, and the value that the teacher wants to add to child's learning. I think whether you teach the national or the international curriculum, the opportunities are there for all, provided they're willing to grab those opportunities. And it pretty much depends on the attitude of the management and the educational ecosystem that you build in a school. That will determine the quality of education that you're delivering in a particular school, irrelevant of whether you're teaching the national or the international curriculum.
Absolutely. And ma'am, with the existence of NEP coming into force, and it's been slowly implemented, some schools have half implemented it, partially implemented it, some are fully implementing it, it's still in progress. Do you think that has played a role in evolving the national curriculum schools to some certain extent, where if you see now career guidance has become mandatory and lot more is brought into force? So do you think that has played a role?
Most definitely, I think NEP is a revolutionary step. But for anything new to really make an impact and for that impact to be visible, it takes a fair amount of time, it takes a few years. So definitely with the coming in of NEP, the NEP in fact is a revolutionary move. But for any revolutionary move to really show its impact, it's going to take a few years. So I think the NEP definitely is going to impact the national curriculum very, very effectively, and the impact will show in the years to come. It, as I said, it is a revolutionary step, and now it's time to really revamp, rethink, and rework on the curriculum and the national curriculum to bring it at par with the best in the world. And I think the Indian education system has always tried to reinvent itself. And
Yes.
we are doing that now. And
Yes.
the impact will be visible in the years to come.
Yes. And in fact, I am seeing that changes and hearing it from school counselors that students are, even the national curriculum students, are putting equal efforts to build their profile compared to an international curriculum student. Ma'am, in your experience, you have been a teacher, you have been a mentor to many, you have been a director, and you have headed schools and led them to excellent levels. And during the progress, you must have faced challenges, I'm sure. Can you quote one or two challenges in your career span and how did you overcome them and you still remember about it? So,
I think the first challenge that I always found students grappling with was when there was definitely a disparity or disagreement between what interested them and what their parents wanted to do. The parents would generally push the students, egg them forward to move towards careers in engineering or medicine or conventional careers like law and so on and so forth. Students wanted to experiment with many other things, and parents would generally resist. So there was frequent discord between the students and their parents.
yeah.
And to resolve the discord, I think was a major challenge. And there, the school counselors had to play a role to get the parents to understand that children have a certain aptitude and we must take into account the aptitude of the students before we recommend a career to them, because they may not do very well in a career that doesn't interest them and that definitely doesn't match their aptitude and is not in sync with their attitude. So that discord, I think, was a big challenge. Then, of course, the other challenge that I found was that, and this is with regard to school systems, where we were just talking about counseling as that plays a very integral role.
Yeah.
Counseling has always, particularly career counseling and counseling also,
Yeah.
where I talk about learning support units.
Yes.
So career counseling and LSUs or learning support units have always been treated as peripheral functions in a school. To my mind, and whichever schools I've headed, I've always ensured that they should not be treated as peripheral functions which are dispensable.
Yes.
They have to be
Completely
treated
agree.
as core functions because career counseling is just as important as teaching physics or math or English in a school. And so are the LSUs, the learning support units that comprise SEN, the special education needs cell, and behavioral counseling, because a lot of students come with emotional baggages from their homes and need support in the school. So school counselors are very integral to ensure that this support is provided so that students can optimize their academic potential. And similarly, students with special education needs. The other challenge is students with special education needs or learning difficulties. I will not call them disabilities, learning difficulties. The parents of such students are always in a denial mode and they don't want to accept the fact that their child may be suffering from a learning problem or a learning difficulty, maybe grappling with a learning
Yes.
difficulty. So, to get those parents to accept that your child is grappling or struggling with a learning difficulty, let us seek out help. Let's go for testing to find out what is the problem. Once the problem is diagnosed, then we can address the problem. I think that was a major challenge that we faced. But by and by, I see over the years there's so much greater awareness amongst the parents. Parents are more receptive. They're accepting the idea. If the school recommends that they can see some yellow alerts that the child has difficulty understanding in class or the child may be suffering from some learning difficulty and should be taken for testing, parents are so much more receptive now and very forthcoming and willing to work in tandem with the school.
Yes.
So over a period of time, this attitudinal shift has also happened.
True. In fact, ma'am, just to add to it, when I was a counselor, I did meet one of the parents. The child was having dyslexia, and initially they were in denial, but then, yes, they supported by going in for further tests and helped that student to cope up. And there was a special educator who was there to support the student within the school. Yes, the school systems have changed now and have evolved compared to what it was when we were young kids, when we didn't know about such learning disabilities and more difficulties, in fact, just like ma'am said. But ma'am, you always have a mixed kind of students when it comes to schools, right? And some are academically good, some are good with their extracurricular activities, some are good with many other activities. How do you ensure there is a balance between academic, extracurricular activities, and character development among students? Because nowadays, whether it's Indian universities or universities overseas, they're all asking for a holistic profile. So, how do you ensure that a student is developed holistically?
I think first thing first, we need to make the parents aware. School counselors need to have sessions with students and parents where they get the parents and students to understand, particularly if they're aspiring to study in good universities overseas, that to have a good resume is very important. Then to have a good resume, you obviously need to indulge in a number of activities. You need to have a very, very versatile kind of personality. So it's for the school counselors to recommend that, well, here are the activities that a student should be indulging in order to build a very rich resume. And it's important that the school takes the onus and responsibility of educating both the
Yes.
children and the parents, so that these young people don't go out and dole out money to private counselors who will charge whopping amounts to recommend the same thing. So I think schools need to take responsibility. And for that reason, I was saying career counseling or career advisory cells in a school should never be treated as secondary to academic subjects.
Absolutely, absolutely, ma'am. In fact, I agree with you. Now that we are further moving from teachers to students and parent community, I would also want to understand from you that as school leaders, what are the key qualities you feel is required in a leader to be successful and to lead the school to greater heights?
Each one has their own leadership style. You can't say any one leadership style is better than the other. But let me tell you, the ability to customize, tweak, adapt, and change your leadership style to suit different ecosystems and different institutions. This is what I've learned over the years, that you need to tweak and change your style in order to cater to the needs of a particular institution. Having said that, there are some qualities I think which are non negotiable, and one of them is commitment. Commitment, I think, is the most non negotiable quality in a leader. A leader needs to be committed to improving the systems that they have inherited from their predecessors. Commitment, I would say. The second is passion. Unless you bring passion to your work, you obviously are neither are you going to succeed, nor will those who are associated with you succeed. The third most important thing is clarity in target setting. A leader needs to set targets and then work very diligently and in a very focused manner towards accomplishing those targets. Fourth, of course, is a collaborative approach. Please do remember that one can never succeed alone. If you have other people who are working in synchronization with you, you're bound to succeed and very effectively. Otherwise, it will be like swimming against the current, because if you're working alone, or you are a dictatorial leader, or you're an autocratic leader, the possibilities are more often than not you will be struggling with the resistance that you're going to get from your colleagues
Yes.
and students and parents. So I think a collaborative approach is very important in a leader. The ability to understand, to be sensitive to the needs of others, to be able to empathize with others. Empathy, I would say, is another great characteristic that every leader should have.
Yes.
So having said that, I think broadly these are the things that a leader should bring to the table.
During your tenure as director, as head of schools, and you have done notably a lot of work where schools have moved up their rank during your leadership. Some of the success stories, or one success story that has imprinted in your mind during that journey, what is it, and how did you lead through, and what were the challenges you faced at that time?
I would say every place that I've worked with, there have been challenges, and I think overcoming those challenges and moving ahead has really been my success. If I were to talk about the GD Goenka group that I worked with, I think the fact that we had one of the largest cohorts in Asia Pacific where IB diploma students were concerned, that was a huge success. Children going to some of the best universities in the world,
Wow.
that is a huge success. If I went to Kasiga as a school, that was the first residential school I headed. I think the school leapfrogged to number 8 in India in the residential co-educational category. and also number two in India, if I were to talk about Uttarakhand. And of course, we put it on the world map with fabulous Cambridge curriculum. Uh, Subsequently, I worked with Ponar for a short while, but I think the relationship that I built with the parents during that short span of time brought me a lot of gratification. I have done backbreaking work in any institution that I have been associated with. I have given my best. And I think that is to me, that is a mark of success because it is always reflected very well in the relationships that I've had with my colleagues, with my managements, with my staff, with the parents, and particularly with the children. So I would treat that as a success story than anything else. If I were to chance upon a student who I would have taught 35 years ago and they're able to recognize me, or if I'm able to recollect their name 35 years after I've taught them, I think that to me is my success as a leader and as a teacher and as an educator.
Absolutely. And that sounds very heartwarming as well if a student remembers and if you are able to recollect at after so many years. Yeah. That's a good thing. Also, with a lot of changes that has happened, like with the pandemic hitting the country and a lot of innovative changes there and there that had to be done, what are some of the, I would say, changes that you did? Not just in the pandemic or whether it's pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, any of the innovative strategies or practices that you implemented in your school that was different from what others did and unique about it. How was it?
See, everybody used technology during the pandemic, before pandemic, and after pandemic, of course. It's a given that everyone is going to use technology. But I've always encouraged my teachers to make sure that their teaching learning is personalized. They use differentiation in the classroom so that they're able to cater to the needs of students of all capacities. This is one. Second, I've always told my teachers, much beyond teaching your curriculum and your subject, it is very important to connect with children first.
Yes.
The moment you connect with children at a personal level, I think their ability to assimilate and respond to your teaching is so much better than it would be if you were simply objectively teaching your subject. So first thing first, we always tell teachers, I've always told my teachers, it's important for you to be humane. Remember also that many years hence, when children look back, they may not be able to, or you may not be able to, just as you're not able to recollect what marks a particular child may have got, but you will remember a child who was courteous. Similarly, children will remember you more for the kindness and the love that you've shown them, rather than the excellence in teaching. Of course, they will remember that. But more than that, they will remember you for your empathy, your sensitivity, your ability to relate with them, your ability to laugh with them, your ability to have them unburden themselves before you, to share their joys and sorrows with you. I think that's what I've always told teachers.
True. In fact, to quote what you had said earlier, commitment, empathy, passion, and now sensitivity, and lot more virtues and I would say principles that are adding in as upcoming leaders or as teachers. There are many, I would say, young professionals who are looking to grow and become impactful leaders in the school segment. So one piece of advice that you feel that they should go through a certain kind of exposure or some resources that they can use. I'm sure everyone has their own journey, but yes, something that you can add on that they can really use and create an impact in the school that they are working.
I think all educators need to learn. First, they need to unlearn and then, relearn. So I think we need to read more. We need to be able to bring more passion to our work. We need to go back and reskill ourselves. We need to take on courses. And today it's so easy to take on new courses. For example, if you go to Coursera and take on a course in teaching pedagogy at virtually negligible cost, I think that is very important. So my suggestion to teachers would be read more, learn more, take on more courses, continue to learn, be a lifelong learner. No teacher who's not a lifelong learner can ever hope to be a great teacher. Do remember the children are moving at a much faster pace. We may not be able to keep pace with them, but definitely we could try that we would edge closer to the children. I know that they move much faster because they have greater exposure to technology, they have greater hunger for learning. But at the same time, do not lose your hunger for learning, your passion, your desire for assimilating more information. What you assimilate, you're bound to disseminate to children. So make sure that you don't lose that craving and that hunger for learning.
So from the counselor's perspective, we have had students where parents come in and they ask us that, ma'am, this university ranks this, like it's a 10th, it's a 100th rank, and I should apply here because it ranks well. And we have various other parameters that we share with the student and the parent, that apart from the ranking, there are other parameters that they need to consider before they make a final choice. Similarly, parents today again are using ranking as a criteria to enroll into different schools. So as a piece of advice, what would you like to share to the parent community? What other factors are involved when they are looking for a right fit for their student?
First and foremost, it's the ranking definitely matters. But more than the ranking, what matters is what interests you. What are the subjects or disciplines that you want to study? That's one. What are the educational destinations or universities and colleges that offer these subjects? That's two. What is the faculty like? And more than that, the support. Are you likely to get enough support from that university or college that you are going to? Is there a student support system? Is there counseling? Is there hand-holding for students? Is the atmosphere hospitable? Is it a close, compact community where every individual's need is going to be looked into? Because a university or college is really as good as not merely the results it produces, but also the experiences that it provides to the learner. Because if the learning is personalized, it's a caring environment, it's a close-knit community where students feel treasured and feel protected and handheld and supported, I think they're going to perform better. So, of course, the rankings matter immensely, but more than that, I think if an institution caters to the needs of a student,
Yes,
that matters much more than anything else.
absolutely. In fact, I completely agree there. And also, in the past few minutes, you have shared a piece of advice for the upcoming leaders. You have shared a piece of advice for the teachers who are growing in this profession. But yes, before we conclude, one open advice, because you have interacted with thousands of students during your experience, if you can give one open advice to the young listeners out there on what they need to keep in mind during their K-12 entire journey.
I would say, most important, children need to learn to be tenacious. When I say they need to learn to be tenacious, every child must know that failure is not the end of the road. Failure is merely an indicator that you need to change direction. Okay, failure is never final. So,
Yes.
this I think all children need to learn. If this is what they learn, the likelihood is that many who fail, even in spite of their best efforts, sometimes students may not get the desired outcomes, which may lead to demoralizing them, and sometimes taking drastic steps also, immolating themselves, taking drastic steps, drastic recourse to self-harming. I would say it's important to be tenacious, that all of us need to know that the moment you fall down and you get up, that's the beginning of another part of your journey. So, first thing first, people need to be resilient and tenacious. Learn the art of resilience, because only then will you be able to survive in a world which is completely unpredictable. We really don't know what the next moment holds for us.
Yes.
So, learn to be resilient.
Yes.
That I think the young people need to learn, and so do the parents.
Absolutely. So yes, young learners, you know what to do. You need to stay resilient. And thank you so much, Dr. Neeta ma'am, for being here today and
pleasure.
sharing your insights and taking time out and being with us today. So this is Anne Gracious signing off today, and stay tuned for more updates on ICAE.